We are living in a new era, the deepest technological revolution in human history.
Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Albert Ten. I'm the global lead of sustainability from Accenture. Today, in today's session, we're going to focus on going green. Are we meeting our targets? This year, global warming has increased by 2.8%. It is 1.5% gap to our Paris Agreement. Our industry, which is yours and mine in the ICT industry, is emitting 700 million tons of CO2 into the environment. That represents 1.4% of the global emission and 4% of the total electricity use in the world. What are we going to do about it? I have invited the industry panel from innovation technology company and also from CSPs around the world to come together to fight for climate action change and see what and where and how we're going to drive this agenda. So we have a jam-packed agenda today. Our first agenda is from Huawei, who's going to talk about sustainable technology. The second agenda, we're going to invite a CSP from Australia, Telstra, who's doing miraculous, interesting things in sustainability. And we're inviting the head of Telstra's Chief Sustainable Officer, Ms. Justine Rhodes, to share with us the insight. On the third agenda, I'm going to be super excited to bring all the sustainable tech leaders of the world, from Intel, from Qualcomm, from Ericsson, and also the CSP like Vodafone, who's actually going to be applying these technologies and shared with us some of their experience with us on stage on how we're going to drive the industry agenda. So without ado, please welcome my first guest, Mr. Peng Xiong from Huawei.
Hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. In Huawei, we believe in two things. As a matter of fact, we all should believe in these two things. First, the fundamental and great role of information and communication technologies in societies, industries, and economies. Second, we believe that we should not hurt our planet Earth just for more data, higher speed, and better performance. We all should live happier, healthier, and safer in a green world. In the next few minutes, I would like to share Huawei vision and practice on going green topic. But first, I would like to thank you all for your attending. And thanks to GSMA, we are back together in this beautiful city of Barcelona. As we all know that matter provides a variety of materials. Energy provides a variety of power, and information provides a variety of knowledge. The first person to compare information with energy and matter was Norbert Wiener, the founder of cybernetics. His research enlightened people to treat matter, energy, information as the three basic elements of social development. On our way to navigate through the intelligent world, these three elements are the fundamental challenging area for the ICT industry when going green. First, management of information flow remains inefficient. Second, a large amount of energy is wasted during conversion. And third, traditional materials have reached almost their processing capability limit. These three-element triangle of matter, energy, and information, they determines whether the green goal of human society can be achieved in the future. It has been also the basic inspiring point for Huawei to continuously innovate in products and solutions based on systematic thinking. Here, I would like to summarize our technological innovation philosophy into the following 3 points. First, we develop new materials to break the limitations that exist with traditional materials and optimize the energy utilization of hardware. Second, we create an innovative architecture with native intelligence to reduce the loss of energy during conversion. And third, we rebuild software algorithms to more efficiently manage information flow. Based on these 3 directions of network evolution, we have proposed an industry vision focused on green development. To make it happen, we keep improving the information and energy transmission efficiency of products to cut network energy consumption. This will help carriers build green networks with stronger performance and higher energy efficiency. Let's first look at matter. Materials are key in navigating future intelligent world and making disruptive innovations. Based on our research in basic theories and materials over the past 30 years, we have been working to increase the energy conversion efficiency of hardware and have had already many breakthroughs. Let's take wireless domain as an example. As higher frequency bands are used, ELA massive MIMO is the most preferred choice as it offers the same coverage as C-band when working at higher bands. This, however, means higher requirements for power amplifiers and baseband algorithms. Huawei has made many breakthroughs in this domain. For example, the signal direct injection feeding technology we use in antenna removes more than 100 meters of cables inside the antenna, and that means there is no feeder loss anymore. And this technology only increases antenna efficiency by 15%. Deeper dormancy is a new direction for 5G energy saving. Huawei's next generation AAU, which is being planned, will shut down most RF and digital channels when networks are idle, and only the power supply unit remain on standby. This will cut the power consumption from 300 watt to less than 10 watt, making 0-bit, 0-watt a reality. Huawei is also doing extensive research on material science. We have developed titanium-plated high conductivity power amplifiers with diamond substrates. And these new materials have reduced the energy consumption of power amplifiers by over 20%. In terms of the energy, we should focus more on efficiency of energy flow and conversion of energy in networks. For example, when energy makes its way into the network, most of it is used for processing data flows. But however, there still will be some of it become heat and wasted. To improve energy efficiency, we are introducing native intelligence into the next generation green network architecture. It contains 3 layers. At the NE layer, equipment is intelligently aware of energy consumption and can adapt it to the service needs. At the network layer, sites across the network can intelligently collaborate for saving energy. This enables optimal energy consumption throughout the network. At the service layer, the cloud intelligently performs modeling and analysis using experiences and energy efficiency data. It carries out model training and algorithm optimization for specific energy-saving scenarios. And these realize intent-driven, scenario-based energy-saving policies. In terms of information processing, the efficiency of information flow management is being constantly improved through the reconstruction of the software algorithms. The popular AI chatbot, ChatGPT, has gained more than 100 million users in 2 months after launch. And we estimate that this app will create an additional 13 GB DOU per month and drive a 100-fold increase in traffic and a 25-fold increase in energy consumption to carrier networks by 2030. This means future networks must become stronger and more efficient in terms of information flow management. For example, wireless networks of the future must consider a range of factors: the difference of service requirements, the difference of space and time domain, the difference of traffic model during peak and idle time. These are very complex issues, and that cannot be addressed through manual approach. Huawei's mobile intelligent engine can replace manual acquisition and analysis of data. It automatically acquires data about site coverage, load, and service, and users in an intelligent platform to analysis, to learn, and model this data in real time. In our journey to navigate through the intelligent world, Huawei will continue investing in fundamental theories, materials, and algorithms to overcome key technological barriers. This will give us the capabilities to create products and solutions with both optimal performance and energy efficiency, and lead us to a greener future. Let's work together to create a better, greener, intelligent world. Thank you very much for your time. I wish you all have a happy, productive MWC week here in Barcelona.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peng Xiong, for a very insightful session of sustainable technology innovations. Now, I would like to invite Ms. Justine Rowe, from the Chief Sustainable Officer from Telstra, to join me on stage. Let's give Justine a big warm welcome. Justine, welcome. Please. Justine, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Welcome and good afternoon, everyone.
Just for the audience benefit, to set some context, why we're talking to Telstra. Telstra is the largest CSP in Australia. Last year, it has actually committed to reducing its net zero carbon strategy by 2030, and it has achieved Scope 1 and Scope 2 reduction of 14%, and Scope 3 by negative 35%. Furthermore, Telstra has actually invested over $1 billion in its renewable. Lastly, Telstra has just announced last week that it has a carbon neutral mobile plan. That's amazing. So I think we need to give Telstra a big applause. Justin, let me ask you and start the first question. what is the commitment and the urge for change from Telstra to be so committed to join the fight against climate change?
Thanks, Albert. And I think you actually set it up quite well at the start of the session, that the science is clear. We are experiencing the changes of climate in everything before our eyes. In Australia, we're seeing an increase in bushfires and floods, and it's actually time to take bold action to address climate change. And certainly from Telstra's perspective, it takes a whole lot of energy to power the country the size of Australia. And so we have over 2.6 million square kilometres of network. And so we've got a responsibility to actually step in and help reduce our own footprint, but also enable our suppliers and customers from a Scope 3 perspective.
Thank you, Justine. Now, can you elaborate a little bit about the challenges in developing your ESG strategy, especially for such a large footprint, such a large network, such diverse population location?
Yeah, so I think for us, it really was about having a look at our own shop first. So looking to reduce the emissions of our own operation. So setting bold ambitions, which we started doing back in 2020 from a Scope 1 and 2 perspective. We had an ambition to reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030 off a FY19 baseline. And by setting that bold ambition, we could then actually build it into our strategy and then look at what kind of steps that we needed to make across the organisation. So back at the end of 2021, we actually brought Scope 3 into that metric as well, as you've identified. And so we also have an ambition to reduce our Scope 3 emissions by 50% as well. And we know that from a Scope 3 perspective, it's sort of around 62% of our emissions are from a Scope 3 perspective. So it's not just looking in our own shop, but it's also looking at how we can enable our suppliers and our customers as well. But Albert, when you asked me about what is the challenge when you have a look at the size of Australia and the network that we have at Telstra, it's a great opportunity, but we also need to be really serious about how we go about doing that. So it is really as basic as starting at what we can actually control and what we can influence, and then building it into our strategy. And so our next sort of wave of our strategy, we've just finished something called T22, and for the next 3 years we're now focused on T25. And the thing that's exciting about sustainability and ESG at Telstra is it's actually built into the core of our T25 strategy. It's no longer sort of something along to the side, which is a nice to have. It's actually core and embedded into our strategy. And of course, what comes with that then is accountability and responsibility. So putting it into our sort of REM and STI, so that really making it incentivised from a financial perspective, but then having appropriate accountability or ownership of my peers in the business that can actually influence the emissions coming out of their respective functions. So it's not enough for me to say, let's be bold, let's be ambitious, let's put it out there. We actually then need to embed it into our process and take accountability across the organisation. And finally, Albert, we also know that our customers and our stakeholders care about this. So we're sort of missing a trick if we're not being ambitious. And we also have an opportunity to engage with the likes of GSMA in terms of setting some of those standards into the future.
Justine, thanks for that. And for me, it's amazing. Sounds like Telstra's done an ESG transformation journey.
Yes.
From strategic planning, strategic management, setting the right KPI, targets and so forth, looking at the right ESG operation levers that is actually impactful to actually drive all the way to the change management itself in sharing the targets and the SBTIs amongst its executive. So I commend you for that. But I'd like to ask you push it a little bit deeper in terms of understanding what is Telstra's major strategic initiatives that you found most impactful, and perhaps share it with the audience so that we can learn something from Telstra in terms of what was done, how it was done, and what was really, really impactful for ourselves.
Sure. So I suppose one of the things that we started with was what's most material to us as an organisation and also to our stakeholders, whether they be investors, customers, regulators, and actually we do a materiality assessment each year, and so that then builds into our strategy. And then we set ambitious targets, and then we look to embed them as we talk about. But in terms of a couple of the initiatives that we've been involved in, certainly we started with getting our own house in order, so looking at our own emissions footprint from our operations. And there's some things that we've done around, and we heard it before in the keynote at the start of the day, actually reimagining how we might be able to have an impact, but starting with getting rid of some of the legacy. So actually decommissioning some of the equipment that we no longer need, or turning things off, really practical steps that you can actually take quite simply in terms of getting real action in your organisation. But then, of course, we looked to our suppliers, and it's that Scope 3 element, which is sort of the next part for us to really embed change. And our suppliers, if we push our suppliers in terms of what we want them to be able to reduce and be part of the journey, we're actually learning from each other. So we're not saying that Telstra has all the answers or our suppliers have all the answers, but it's actually getting quite close to our suppliers and actually being on the journey together in terms of taking bold initiatives. But we know that not all of our suppliers are as mature as each other either. And so we actually partner with CDP that actually help educate. We've got some tools and processes that help educate some of our suppliers as they're on their journey. So that's an example from a Scope 3 perspective, and we've also been tracking our Scope 3 emissions and trying to wrap our arms around how we actually capture that data, and Accenture's had a real role to play in our development over time. We've been engaging with Accenture since 2017, I think, and it's been great to be able to forecast where the emissions or the biggest pain points are coming, so then you can actually focus on where your initiatives are going to have the biggest impact. The nirvana to come is actually to be able to track in real time all of the emissions, and I know that we're on that journey as well. Another thing that we've done is actually investing in sequestration of carbon. So we've actually invested in a carbon farm in Australia, in New South Wales. And what we're doing there is we're planting a number of native trees to actually, over 25 years, take out about 160,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which is pretty phenomenal. And the reason that that's really exciting is we're also using it as a bit of a test and learn environment. So we're using technology on the farm. We're using drones to plant the seeds. We're using quite a unique probiotic fertilizer that kind of that encapsulates the seed as well. And also we've got data and analytics that can tell us in real time how investment is making an impact over time. And so the carbon farm was something that's pretty innovative and something that is really quite a bit of a standout for us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Justine. And lastly, with all this innovation that Telstra's done, and I've been constantly talking to many chief sustainable officers around the world, and they see CSPs or telcos being an enabler for ESG.
Yes.
How do you see Telstra's future in Australia's low carbon future?
Well, I think it's a massive opportunity, and it's a massive opportunity for our industry to be enabling the transition. So we're known as an industry that does actually innovate and come up with new tech to solve big, hairy problems. This could not be a bigger, hairier problem that we're trying to solve, and so actually innovating and having an ecosystem where we can learn from each other is super important. But also we already have tech that is enabling customers to reduce their own emissions, reduce their own footprint. So if you think about things as simple as navigating from an on-premise solution to cloud, you're going to reduce your emissions. If you think about agriculture, using IoT and telematics in terms of the way that you actually manage your farm, or you monitor the water that's being used on your farm. And of course there's AI and big data, which we've heard about earlier today as well. So there's so much opportunity for us to be enabling the transition for our customers and also our suppliers. And I think it's we heard in the keynote earlier today from Mats and Jose about this development of an ecosystem and an open ecosystem. I must say that being involved in the sustainability space, that there is such an openness to share insights and learnings, because we're actually all tackling this problem together. And being open to sharing and learning from each other, I actually think is part of the key. And I know you've got some great folks coming up on the panel next that will be able to demonstrate where using the cutting edge tech is really making a difference. And I'm excited about the opportunity, and I think many others in this room would be as well.
Ms. Justin Rowe, thank you for sharing. Thank you for a very insightful session. And I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Albert. Thanks, everyone.
Please give Ms. Justin Rowe a big hand. In my next agenda, I'm going to invite a panel of sustainable tech leaders to the stage. First of all, can I invite Ms. Joanna Newman to come along the stage as the Senior Director of Technology Partnership from Vodafone. Next, can I please invite Ms. Angela Baker, the Chief Sustainable Officer from Qualcomm. And further, Ms. Pallavi Mahajan, who is the Vice President of Network and Edge Software from Intel. And lastly, Mr. Freddie Songren from Ericsson. Welcome. You guys will give my panelists a big hand. Thank you. Now, guys, as an industry now today, ITU is suggesting that our industry needs to reduce carbon emission by 45%. This needs to be achieved by 2050. I would love to hear from the panelists what is the different technology leaders in the world doing something about it. Perhaps I'll start with Angela from Qualcomm.
Hello, how are you?
Very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So Angela, can you share with us how is Qualcomm developing its net zero carbon strategy?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's going to sound very similar to Justine's actually. So I don't want, without being too repetitive, maybe we'll just give sort of a high level. But at Qualcomm, we also have a 2040 net zero target across all three scopes, science-based target aligned. And we are also starting within our own operations, right? Looking at decommissioning cogen plants that we might have on campus. We only have a few, but getting rid of those. Doing large-scale PPAs in our top operational footprints, right? Europe, Asia. Obviously, it's easier in some places than others to procure renewable energy, but really looking at how we can leverage and procure more renewable energy. And then, Qualcomm is primarily fabless. We do have 3 fabs, which came through an acquisition of RF360, but looking at some process emissions changes within those fabs about what we could do in terms of abatement to reduce that footprint. So we're really focused on Scope 1 and Scope 2 right now, as well as working with our supply chain, primarily our top 9, which is over 90% of our spend, in terms of our top, our manufacturing suppliers. And having conversations with them. Many of our suppliers also have net zero targets. They might be 2040, they might be 2050. So everyone's working towards these goals. It's just a matter of who's working a little bit more quickly or how we can work together on some of these programs. That's sort of the first bucket. I would say the second bucket is power efficiency, building power efficient chips. We have a public goal around reducing the power usage by 10% year over year. Actually, our annual corporate responsibility report is publishing today, hot off the press if you want to read it. But we've actually reduced by 20% in our Snapdragon mobile platform products this year. So double, increase the output, but reduce the power usage. And then the third bucket is probably what you've heard a lot about if you walk in anybody's booth, which is this digital transformation piece, right? And how can 5G, 6G, how can these technologies be leveraged? You heard from our colleague at Huawei, he gave a lot of use cases and examples as well. But what does that mean in terms of water optimization, reducing greenhouse gases? I think that the number that they've said in the US is that it could reduce by 20% if you have a full proliferation of 5G, right? So, but what does that actually mean? Getting 5G on the smart energy grid so they're more responsive to data needs and they're running more efficiently, or large-scale agriculture farms, which we just heard from Justine, whether it's drone or AI, machine learning, or some projects that we have around wind turbines and drones to make sure that they're operating as efficiently as possible, right? So I think helping to build out those use cases, that's a huge area of focus for Qualcomm and working across our entire value chain with a number of customers and partners, probably for many folks on this stage as well, to develop those use cases in order to help deploy 5G even more quickly.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
I'm going to direct the next question to Ms. Pallavi from Intel. What do you see is the most crucial building block in achieving the net zero carbon strategy by 2050 for Intel?
It has to be technology, technology, and technology. We have to use technology as a force for good to drive sustainable outcomes across our industry. Now, whether you call it hardware advancements, whether you call it software, whether you call it, the power of artificial intelligence, and more importantly, we have to get the power of collective. I was so happy to hear Justine talk about it. We have a lot of examples where operators like Vodafone, they're using artificial intelligence to dynamically watch traffic patterns and basis of that, go about and adjust their energy requirements. We have examples of, every time you do a hardware upgrade or you go about and do a software upgrade, that brings in more energy efficiency, and that's all good. I think anything that we can do that brings down the energy requirement, anything that we can do that reduces the carbon footprint, that's the need of the hour. I mean, especially, we guys are here in Europe. The families here in Europe have been struggling with soaring energy bill. Closer home in the UK, I know of families that struggle to get basic amenity like heating. And, if all across the US, the cell site power consumption could be reduced by 40%,
Yep.
that is enough electricity to light up a country like Bhutan or a country like Luxembourg.
Wow.
That's the quantum of impact that we can actually go about and do. And to me, we all, technology vendors, operators, service providers, government, NGOs, industry leaders, we all need to come together in order to go about and solve this problem, which is the power of collective that we are talking about.
Great. So we've heard the innovations around the software, the hardware, and the cloudification.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to point to Freddie to talk about networks. Right. With 75% of carbon emission coming from the RAN, or radio access network, of a mobile network, how is Ericsson addressing this issue?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's really a challenge of reducing the energy consumption in the network, meeting the net zero targets, while at the same time catering for the growth in data and also the increasing expectation from users in terms of performance, reliability, and speed. And I think if you look historically, we haven't been very good at solving this. Every new generation we have introduced, we have added more equipment, we have increased the energy consumption, and we have really just added on top, layers on top. But luckily, 5G is by far the most energy efficient technology we have. It's actually 13 times, up to 13 times more energy efficient compared to a 4G equivalent site. So in my mind, what we should be talking about is how do we scale 5G where it's really needed in a sustainable way. And we at Ericsson, we look at this in 3 buckets. So first of all, we need to look at network planning and network design in a more holistic way. So we need to think about how do we correlate user experience with speed and with the capacity in the networks to really make sure that we create the optimal balance and only build more capacity where it's actually needed. Secondly, we have to modernize the networks. As I mentioned before, 5G is inherently more efficient. So we need to accelerate the transition from 4G to 5G, and while doing that, get rid of the legacy equipment that is significantly more power hungry than the latest equipment. And then thirdly, we need to operate the networks in a more intelligent way. We need to look at the latest AI, machine learning, automation tools that are out there, and then apply that to how we turn on and off the network, how we allocate capacity where it's actually needed, and so forth. And I think if we do all of these three things in concert as one industry, I'm quite optimistic that we will be able to meet the very high ambitious targets we have, while at the same time increasing the user satisfaction and the capacity in the networks. So that's the challenge, and I'm really optimistic on it.
Wow. So you can hear all the innovations from Qualcomm, from Ericsson, and from Intel. Let's point to Joanna and ask, how is Vodafone leveraging a lot of this technology innovation, and especially how Vodafone is applying the innovation in your daily operation, network operations and practice?
Yes, no, that's a great question as well. And there's lots of innovation coming from our vendors and from our suppliers. There's lots of support from government and regulators to actually be able to close down some of that legacy equipment, which in some cases we're bound to keep open until they decide that we can, etc. What we're really seeing are lots of opportunities to act across 4 buckets. So you had 3, I have 4. I'm sorry, I'm last. So 4 buckets. So the first is to purchase power responsibly. The second is to generate it responsibly and use renewable energy where possible, and we're already doing that across the majority of our European footprint. It's important to remember that Vodafone is the 2nd largest mobile company in the world. We operate in 22 markets, we've got joint ventures in another 6 or 7, we've got Vodacom in Africa, we operate across another 60 markets with our various partners. So what we try to do is to act not only as Vodafone, but also Vodafone, Vodacom, our partner markets as well. So that's for power generation and responsible purchasing. We also focus on reducing consumption in the network. So as Freddie said, to take some of that customer experience data and use it to what I like to call right size or optimize the resources that are associated with it. To following up on what Angela said, to work with governments to allow us to actually have sensible regulations so that we can decommission things that we need to. And you're speaking about factories, I'm speaking more about sites, etc. And then our 4th element is to follow sustainable purchasing decisions. So not necessarily scope 3 as described by the others, but to ensure that we're weighting appropriately in our RFPs and RFQs for our own network and all of the networks that we influence around the world, that we're really giving the right weighting towards carbon responsible solutions. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanna. Now, I'll just go to direct this to Pallavi and ask, how can software innovation accelerate the overall carbon reduction? Seemingly now we have a decentralized network, especially with the innovation of Cloud RAN, Open RAN, and so forth.
Yeah.
How do you see software playing a crucial role in this?
Yeah, you know, I was talking about innovation, and what is that one thing that gets you innovate faster? It is software, right? Whether you're talking of agility, whether you're talking of innovation. So there is a lot of trust, and we are seeing across the industry a lot of stuff now move over to software just because of the speed of innovation. And when you look at software, there are multiple ways of looking at it. We at Intel, we call that our mission is to liberate the world from fixed form factor devices to now software that runs on general purpose compute. And you know, this is a long-term secular shift of more and more software running on general purpose compute from the cloud to the edge. We've already seen the software-defined transformation happen in the networks. We are now seeing in the RAN side of things. Sure. You know, the RAN is getting virtualized. And the RAN is the most complex, and also 75% of the energy consumption in the whole deployment is with the RAN. And it's not just this space, but even in the edge, when you look at it, more and more workloads are getting consolidated. They're becoming more cloud native. And a lot of stuff is moving over to software. So, you know, I'm talking about these transformations, but how does it help us from a sustainability point of view? So let's look at energy efficiency. So when you are moving everything over to software, for you to bring in efficient software, it's as good as just an upgrade of the OS on your phone. You don't have to wait for a hardware refresh. So, you get efficiency faster. Networks, as networks are getting designed more and more into cloud native, that just provides the opportunity to operators to go about and dynamically reconfigure, deploy services based on changing customer patterns, choices. All of that goes about and brings in a lot of energy efficiency. And every conversation has to have artificial intelligence. I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence. When you bring in fine-grained telemetry, real-time monitoring, and then you bring in artificial intelligence, it brings you so much capability to go about and bring power efficiency. That's one side of the coin, but we are also talking about how do we reduce the carbon footprint. When you don't need to have a hardware refresh for every feature, you can get it through software. That helps you. When instead of having 20 different devices in your edge, if you can consolidate all of that onto one hardware, that's carbon footprint reduction. So a lot of these use cases. But at Intel, we are also very focused. I keep on talking about this power of collective because we have to democratize our technology in terms of making it open source, in terms of making it highly programmable. So I was hearing Justine talk about some of the examples. I'll share a couple of the examples that, some solutions that Intel has worked with. It's with an ISV called Presidace. What they do is they do just-in-time inventory for fast food retail chain. And you will think, why is she talking about it from a sustainability point of view? It is because it is reducing so much of food wastage.
Yes.
Now with artificial intelligence, you can actually go about and with 99% of accuracy, you can detect any crop diseases. So, you go about and reduce chemicals, you bring more crop yield and all of that stuff. So it's all about bringing in, software makes it more open, more easy for people to go about and bring innovation.
Thank you. We've heard lots about cloudification of the network specifically. I'm going to direct back to Johanna on the recent study on Open RAN that Vodafone has done. Johanna, can you elaborate a little bit about the study, and especially with the cloudification of network, with all the software is involved, the cloud technology and the network? I think it's just a right converge point to understand the impact of the study.
Absolutely, and I'd invite everybody to come and see our stand in Hall 3 and see the great work that we're doing with Open RAN with Intel, we're doing it with Qualcomm, we've got activities with Ericsson as well, and to come and see how we're really bringing this to life. I describe some of this as where the rubber meets the road. We've got some great some great commitments, we've got passion, we've got a collective industry moving forward, and we've got some economic environments that are really supporting us and making this transformation much faster. So if you come into the Vodafone booth, you'll see a few demonstrations of Open RAN, which demonstrate more than 15% power savings on the compute. Now that's using the current generation of the Intel chips. I'm told that it's going to be much more when we hit Sapphire Rapids next year, right? You'll see a demonstration where we're looking at Qualcomm GPUs and how that's being consolidated on a chip so that you don't need to have that additional hardware there. You can control that in software and make that much more programmable and cut down the release cycles and the time to release because it's not hardware any longer. You'll see savings that are coming from what we expect to see in massive MIMO when we move from from programmable FPGAs to ASIC and soft ASIC where we can upgrade in massive MIMO. So come and see all of those savings, and collectively it is going to be more than 9 to 14% is what we expect. Now, a qualifier for that. This is a proof of concept or a pilot. We have to get all the way to production to maintain those numbers, but they're really promising. And lastly, you'll see our network in a box, which is a femtocell that can sit in your home or in a small business or in the deep caverns of a conference center, which helps bring 5G to those locations as well, that operates at 12 watts is what they said when it's not being fully utilized. So we're really taking advantage of all of the innovation that's happening. And I'd love to say that this is solely Vodafone, but it's not. It's Vodafone, it's the O-RAN Alliance, it's the Linux Foundation, it's open source capabilities, the Telecom Infra Project, etc. So we really are driving for a collective solution to these problems to reduce energy in the RAN. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanna. So there is a constant theme across all the panelists here today on data, on customer experience benchmarking, energy efficiency benchmarking, and how do you turn data to apply in the future greener networks. I'm going to direct to Freddie to ask Freddie, how is Ericsson leveraging data to actually drive this greener future networks?
Yeah. So first of all, we leverage AI and machine learning and data across our entire portfolio. And of course, there's a lot of innovation happening all the way from the way we utilize the underlying hardware all the way up to how we manage the full network. So it really sits across. If we look at going back to how we operate networks more intelligently, I think there is a lot more we can do, and we are, right now, we have launched 200 AI-powered apps that we are now working with customers to implement, which is trying to, what you said, optimize the customer experience and the energy usage more in the correlation. And what we have been able to do when applying these different applications is build a predictable traffic model that looks at historical data, it looks at real-time data, and it tries to predict not only the capacity in the network, but the actual user experience using the network. And by looking at that, we can then dimension the different capacity, how it's allocated in the network. We can turn on and off not only base stations, but individual carriers, individual bands. And then we can also do this in a way that has zero impact on the user experience. And we actually deployed this full breadth of apps at a customer in Asia recently. And we managed to get the total energy consumption down by 25% when deploying this. So that's really, really impactful. And that was done without the users noticing. It's only about turning on the on and off these features, these apps, based on the actual traffic.
Well, thank you, Freddie. So what I've been hearing from the panel today, it seems like we have three major themes happening in terms of how we as industry leaders can actually act and do more for this cause. Number one, there's a whole ESG clarity in ESG planning and strategy. Number two, there is a whole ecosystem partnership at play, which what Pallavi and Fred has actually mentioned. And number three, there's a whole bunch of Scope 3 partnership, supply management, and education, which Angela's mentioned about it. And number four, it's about leveraging data and insights as the new management tool for ESG to drive more and accelerate the industry more. That's what I've been hearing. Perhaps this is an open question, but let's start with Angela. What can we do with our suppliers? What else more can we do with our suppliers today that you've seen that you've done with Qualcomm?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to get, and you just talked about data, but it's to get your hands around the data. And I think Scope 3 continues to be challenging. It continues to be challenging, right? You can't reduce your footprint until you know what your footprint is, right? So I think we've been publishing our Scope 3 for a number of years. I think probably everybody on this stage has been, but we continue to refine it, right? And I think that can provide or present challenges when you're trying to reduce it. A lot of it right now is also based on spend, right? And so it's not an accurate portrayal of what your data is. So working with your suppliers to get that actual real, I think, we're saying real-time data, so it's more accurate. And what is the actual footprint? And it's hard when your suppliers also supply to a number of people, right? So I think the first step is to get the most accurate data that you can, working with your suppliers on strategies that you may have implemented within your own Scope 1, Scope 2 reduction. So maybe helping them to procure renewable or work, do cost sharing or things like that if that's a possibility. Obviously, it's very expensive, especially if your supply chain is predominantly in Asia, right, in places like Singapore and stuff where the cost of energy is very, very expensive. And then helping them look at strategies that they can also reduce their footprint. So if it's not just about procuring renewable energy, but also looking at their scope 1, what changes can they make within their buildings or within their factories or places like that. So I would say we're still pretty early in our journey. I don't want to oversell, I think, but we do have a commitment. We have interim targets by 2030 and by 2040 to be net zero. So it's definitely a huge focus for us. And yeah, check back with me in 2 years. Maybe I'll have even more strategies to focus on.
I will then divert to Pallavi. In terms of, you mentioned earlier on about building an ecosystem, a partnership. And I think especially coming from software, you're like the glue for the hardware, the networks and the chipsets, and also the data that's actually. How do you see we can do better in terms of bringing a tighter ecosystem partners together?
Yeah, you heard me talk about technology. I think the key is making technology simple and easy to use so that then you can bring in innovation at the mass level. And which is where, everything that we do, it has to be standard based. We were talking about the O-RAN Alliance. There's going to be a lot of innovation in the RAN space, but if everyone is doing it very differently versus standard-driven innovation, has to be standard-based, has to be open, has to be programmable. And one of the things that Intel does is we have a network builder function where we make it easy for people to come in, access our technology. A lot of that is open source. So, playgrounds where you can come in and test the AI algorithm that will give you the best crop yield. How do you make technology easy, accessible, and available to the masses? That's our focus at Intel.
Great. And Freddie, how do you think that we can use AI better in terms of collecting the data from the network, from the software, from the customer experience that we just talked about earlier?
So I think it goes back to the collaboration topic again. Right? I think we could do better at collecting the data in a standardized way, sharing that in the broader supply chain, and then understanding, how do we, all the way from the service provider that has the access to the end user and the end user data, how do we get that all the way up to and draw learnings from that, all the way up the supply chain, all the way down to how we design the hardware, the chips, the radios. I think there's a lot more we can do in that end-to-end transparency. Of course, within the guidelines of GDPR or kind of protecting the end user data. So I think we have been a little bit cautious. We have been a little bit on the safe side when it comes to sharing data. But I think that's changing now. So I would say that's number one. Number two, which is more on the algorithm side, on the AI side. I think there again we have focused a lot on open standards, open technology, open source. We haven't focused so much on how do we scale algorithms, how do we improve jointly the AI learning. We shouldn't be forced to provide learning for the AI multiple times. That should be something that we share across the industry. So I think there's a lot more to do there on the collaboration side.
So, yeah, to that point, we in Accenture are trying to bring and work together with the CSPs and the tech partners still yourself to be able to learn and share lessons learned on the green network and whether the benchmark and the KPIs itself, working closely. And I think probably to Joanna's point earlier on the Open RAN experience, I think it's a pilot, but once it scales up, that we will be able to scale and actually learn more. And from the lessons learned in the industry, we can share and actually apply to our operations and our practice. So with that, of course, I would like to thank the panel for sharing a very insightful session. And please welcome and thank them.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
For having us.
Thank you very much.